Hello, thank you for supporting me, Bones Crochet. I'm going to show you how to cut fabric into yarn, and I am using a spandex polyester mix material. It's used for swimwear. I also use a nylon lycra mix. It really just depends if the fabric is stretchy. I like to get something that's a 4-way stretch, but anything that really works for swimwear is good. Just make sure it has that stretch to it and you could actually wear this in the water. Okay, so before we start, you're gonna need a roller cutter or a scissor and a ruler. Now, I usually like to use the roller cutter because it gives a cleaner look in the end, and it's a lot easier to use with the ruler as opposed to a scissor. But I'm going to do both just to show you the difference. So to get started, we're gonna have to fold our fabric. And to do that, you're gonna have to fold from the bottom to the top so the non-folded edges are touching. And I'm just gonna flip this around so it's easier to see on the camera view. But make sure these are touching from corner to corner. And then what we're gonna do is go on the bottom folded half and we're gonna fold over once more, but we're gonna go right before the ending of those non-folded edges because we're not gonna cut through them. We're just gonna barely miss it. We're gonna cut right over this fold and then stop. So to start, you're gonna take your ruler and you could measure this. Cutting mat has measuring lines, so I'm just gonna use them and I'm gonna do 1/2 inch for each strip, just so it's easy to see. And so for the first strip, you're gonna start off and we are going to take our roller cutter and we're going to start from cutting on the bottom fold part, and then we're gonna go all the way up just past that folded section. So if you want to take a closer look here, let me zoom in. What we just cut is through the 4 folded fabrics. Sorry, it's 1 fabric, but it's 4 layers. So we just cut through 4 layers of this fabric and we just missed the edges here. So if you were to cut all the way through, it wouldn't work. I got pretty close here, but it'll be fine in the end. You could always tie them together too, you'll see, but just make sure to barely miss that spot. Okay, so I'm gonna go again here, just so you could get it with a closer view. We're gonna go another 1/2 inch, which is this right here, right here. Okay, so now we're gonna go another 1/2 inch and we're gonna just cut right a little bit after this folded section. Okay. So basically, sometimes my roller cutter is a little dull right now, so it didn't cut all the way through, but if you ever have that issue, just cut a little bit so you get towards those non-folded edges. Now, with the scissor, it's a little more hard because you can't really like cut directly on the line, so you have to give some room or some leeway so you actually have the right measurement. So I'm just gonna measure 1/2 inch with my ruler and then put my finger here and then just move the ruler a bit over so that you have room to actually cut. And just hold down with the ruler. It doesn't have to be perfect, but just make sure it's sturdy, the fabric. And I'm lining it up with the 1/2 inch line here, so it's easy to see. That's why I left my finger there, just to make sure. But go ahead and cut. Just past that line. And as you can see, the difference between a scissor and roller cutter is immense. It might be because I used a ruler to hold it down, but it won't be straight, usually with the scissor the way you want it. But even if I don't have the ruler, it might be a little bit better, but I will show you. So a little bit cleaner, but still not as perfect as the roller cutter. So I would just really recommend using that roller cutter. So I'm going to finish cutting every 1/2 inch until I get to the end of the fabric. Okay, so what I like to do is take these folded edges and just put them over so they're not in the way. Okay, and now what we're gonna do now is we're gonna cut, sorry, let me make this better. We're going to cut the first strip here, and we're just gonna cut right through. So before, when I cut a little too much, thankfully it was the first strip, but we're going to cut that off, just one of them. And then from there, we're gonna continue in cutting in pairs. So I'm gonna cut these two together, and so on. So I'm gonna cut these two in a pair, and I'm gonna keep doing this until I get to the end of the fabric. Okay, and now we're gonna have to do the same for the other side. So you can move these pieces actually just for a second. Now we're gonna do the bottom half, but the difference with the bottom half and the top half is you're not gonna cut just the first one on the bottom. You're actually gonna just keep cutting in pairs. Until you get to that very last one. And you could just cut this one by itself. Sometimes there's stragglers. I don't really know if it matters, but we're probably gonna have to cut it off anyway. But here is another suggestion I like to give when cutting yarn. We're gonna have these square looking, awkward kind of fabric pieces, and we're gonna wanna cut around in a circular motion. That way when we actually pull to make the yarn, it's not, it doesn't have these corners sticking out and makes it bulky when you're actually working on your crochet project. So I'm gonna go ahead and just cut around, kind of like an arch. Doesn't have to be perfect, but just make sure that you get rid of those corner pieces. That way they're just round, and when we pull, it will look a lot better. So go ahead and do that to every single piece that has the corners sticking out, and then come back and I will show you what to do next. Also, a little piece of advice, sometimes you cut a little too far on these raw edges here. So if that ever happens and you cut too far, you could always just make a knot. So I'll just cut it to show you. You just want them to connect essentially. So I'm gonna tie them together and just make a secure knot. You see this a lot in like t-shirt yarn that you buy when there's a knot at some point in the yarn. And I think it's because I don't really know how they make it, if it's in factories or if they're doing it like me, but yeah, you're gonna need to connect the yarn at some point, and then you could just cut off those stragglers. Okay, and you could just continue like normal and keep cutting your corner pieces. Okay, I just cut all my corners, and to start the yarning process, we're gonna take the first strip that we cut. So make sure to find that first strip that we cut off at the beginning, and we're simply going to pull, and that automatically makes the fabric fold in on itself, as you can see here, which is really pretty, and it gives a nice finishing touch. So you're just gonna do that throughout all of the yarn that you, or all the fabric that you cut, and that is how you're gonna make it into yarn. Okay, I got to the end here and it worked out the way we cut it. There was no stragglers or cut off pieces at the end. So just make sure to cut it the way I showed you and you will have the same. But once you go ahead and pull all of that fabric to make it into the yarn, you have your yarn ready. I would suggest caking it if you have a yarn winder, or if you want to just use your hands, simply roll around in a circle. But if you're making a lot, definitely get a yarn winder and make a cake out of it. But I just did a little sample to show you guys today, and I really hope that you're able to make this work, and I hope this tutorial was helpful. So definitely leave some comments and let me know what you thought below, but definitely post some videos if you end up making the yarn, and good luck.